All right, welcome back to another Discovering God podcast. And we took a little break for a little while, but we're back. We're getting back rolling under another format. And I have with me my very good friend in just in life and ministry, Jeff McLain. So, Jeff, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, well, it's great to be here. It's great to be on this podcast. My name is Jeff McLain. I serve as a pastor in a small rural church as well as full-time for a local rescue mission that works with those who are suffering from homelessness.
Yeah. So, Jeff, we've been friends for a lot of years now.
For sure.
I was talking with someone, we've lived here longer than we lived in Connecticut.
Wow.
And so we've been friends basically that long. I think our friendship really started out when it really kind of took off as we both entered into ministry.
I'd agree with that.
But
yeah.
we were at the Vineyard Church here, and we were on leadership team together. So we were, before ministry, we were kind of team members together.
That's right.
And then we both found our way into leadership roles, pastoral roles, and I think that's where our friendship really came off, right? Really just kind of accelerated.
Yeah.
And in that, I know for me, it was because of the pressures of ministry and what we're kind of both going through differently simultaneously. I know for me, it was like being able to lean on you for feedback, but also support, which was just, oh my gosh. At the time, it was a godsend. It was like a life raft.
Yeah, for me as well.
Yeah. So we kind of went through that time. Now, many years later, I'm out of official ministry. Some people still refer to me as pastor this or that. By the way, we have Blake. Blake Wahlberg is also, he is our producer. So Blake, go ahead and say hello.
Hi. Happy to be here. Happy to be helping out.
Oh, we're glad to have Blake, and Blake's going to chime in anytime he feels like it as well. So we just want to be conversational in this. So anyway, just to get this started tonight, we're going to talk tonight about basically celebrity in the church and the impact of celebrity in the church. You and I have been through, we've been in ministry, we've seen things. I was thinking about it today. You've seen things, which I hope will come up tonight, where you were part of a certain field, and you really saw celebrity in one manner related to the church. I won't say I had celebrity, because I definitely didn't, but I saw it up close and personal.
Yeah. And
so we're going to talk a little bit about that. Hopefully get some, I don't know if balance is the right pursuit, but just some assessment of it.
Yeah.
Really.
At least put it on there and be able to sort through it a little bit.
Yeah. Sort through it. Does it contribute positively? Yeah. What are some upsides? What are some downsides? Just kind of one of the things that I'll probably reference a little bit here and there, I know you have some thoughts on your end, but is a book that, do you remember when Chris Freet actually posted about this book? It's called Celebrities for Jesus, How Personas, Platforms, and Profits Are Hurting the Church.
No, I don't remember that, but that sounds like a great read. Did you read it?
I read the book, and it was on point. To be cool. That'll kind of give myself away maybe, and it's some bias, but that definitely was a fantastic book.
And who is the author of that?
Let me find it. I should have had that. Caitlin Beatty is the author. So yeah, but we're just going to start out. Like, tell me a little, Jeff, first. What kind of exposure did you have to celebrity, religious celebrity, and so forth?
I think when we talk about celebrity, I think we also have to realize that not everyone is going to admit that their church or their movement has a wrestling or a tension or a problem with celebrityism. There's also the idea that sometimes this is called authority, or somebody has the favor of God on them. And so we use other terms that actually, I think when we root through this evening, we're going to see that a lot of that really echoes each other. I grew up in the Lancaster County area, which I used to joke is a buckle of the Bible Belt. Even though we're here in the north, there is a huge tradition of historic Christian movements that have come out of this area. Many people are part of multi-generations of believing and faith systems and church systems. And so I think growing up here, even though I never felt like I was part of any of those kind of networks. I mean, my maternal side would have some long-lasting ties to the area, but my father's side was atheist, and so I'm a second generation on his side of believers, and so I never really felt into the church world here. But growing up in it, I realized as I became disillusioned with it how strong it was. And early on, I was part of a church that really, I saw the pastor was in a seat that could not be questioned. And I remember us going through a study, and I asked some questions about it, and it was given this idea, right, of you don't get to question him because he's the pastor. And that is a form of celebrity. And so that's a minor one, right? But over the years, as I began to work in the music industry...
That was what I was kind of
getting at. As I began to work in the music industry, I saw how that manifested in different ways. There were certain people... In fact, in that era, Nashville was kind of the center of the evangelical world. It was the place where almost all merchandise was made. You had all the largest book publishers down there. You had all the largest Christian record companies down there. Bands were moving down there. And as I kind of began to work into Christian music, as I emerged out of my spiritual search and had largely worked with non-Christian music up to that point, I realized that there were certain people that just carried this awe or this aura around them that you were just to respect them, and to be honest, early on I realized that there was a character deficiency in many of them, but they were able to carry this certain togetherness that people were attracted to, and those people could open any closed door. It felt like it didn't matter if you had more skill or experience. Some of those people seemed to carry with it a certain weight, and they also were the people, and we've joked about this, that became like kingmakers in Rome when there wasn't a son for the king. There was a committee formed to decide who would rise in power. And I think for years the Christian music world, and therefore the church, the Christian music festival scene, all that carried some of that sort of spiritual authority.
And so by kingmaker, you and I kind of mean... I'd say among a few things, we mean things like sometimes someone kind of looks at you and quickly assesses whether you play at their level or not, right?
Yeah.
And if you don't, you go nowhere, right?
That's exactly right.
And the second thing that would go along with that is if you do, then they're going to want to open doors for you because it's going to benefit them.
Yep.
But if you don't, never look for a door to be open for you.
Yeah.
At least from them.
Yeah.
Right.
That was my experience.
Yeah. But celebrity-wise, care to share your... You don't have to, but you had some... What I'm getting at is a little joking because we have a history together, but you were known too, not on that...
More for the troublemaking than...
Well, yeah, but still, you also had
I got the
growing notoriety, right?
Yep, yeah.
When you kind of came off the road.
Yeah, especially, I had started in concert promotion and then moved into artist management and also was involved in some activism that involved music. And so all those things created, somewhat of a following.
Yeah.
It doesn't exist today in any ways. Right. That world is very much you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours, which is what you're talking about. But I also think that I always was just a cusp away from it. Like I could see it, I could taste it, I feel it, but I never was fully there. But at one point, there were quite a few names that I was able to rub shoulders with, get to know. Sometimes, as I said, wondering what is this person? Yeah, they're not. I always tell people never meet your heroes. There was one time I was at a Gospel Music Awards, and I was hanging out with Stryper actually on the bridge, and they were fine. They were good. You can meet them. But there was another guy there telling me about another group that was on the bridge with us. There was this bridge above the convention center where there was a restaurant, and he was like, "Oh, I just want to go up and meet them." And I knew these guys, and I knew, they weren't great. And I said, "Man, just never meet your heroes. And that was news, a line that was given to me by a friend of mine that met Larry Norman. He grew up very enthralled with Larry Norman. Larry Norman also had some significant character deficiencies.
Yeah.
And he said, Jeff, whatever you do, never meet your heroes.
So speaking of, you just reminded me, I don't think I texted you this, but did you know that Petra was either in the area or close by? Like, they're still a thing.
Yeah, they're still, I mean...
Just speaking of,
I was able to do a concert with the original lead singer, Greg X Volts.
Yeah.
And so I did a concert. In fact, that year I was at Nashville, I did a showcase with him.
Okay.
And John Schlitt, I think is the second singer. They were there. I mean, those guys were in their late 60s, early 70s then. And so, yeah.
Something of their group is still going around
and
today.
Selling large concerts, yeah.
Yeah, and I was like, oh my gosh. I'm like, I'm thinking in my head, these guys are playing locally somewhere, and yet I'm flashing back to when I would listen to them. They were the Christian rock of that moment.
And if you don't know them, just search God Gave Rock and Roll to You, and not the Kiss version, but yeah.
So let's jump into how do we think fame in the church is defined? Yeah. And are we talking about fame or are we talking about celebrity? We're probably talking about celebrity.
Yeah.
So how would we are we going to differentiate them, or are we going to and define them?
Yeah.
I don't think there's a formal definition, but I think there's some working descriptions.
Yeah. You know, I think most of us would agree leadership is needed at some level in any group of people. And in any group that you form, organically even, a leader or a group of leaders will arise. And so when we're talking about this, we're not just talking about leadership, but we're talking about a whole nother level of leadership. We're talking about not just influence, but we're talking about when somebody has the power to almost... move people forward, I think, right, based on just their name or this kind of sense of awe that's on them. And so, how would you define celebrity? I'm curious about that.
So, it's I go back to like when I've been talking to a couple of friends over the years, and how I would always say fame. You know, the fame in the church is just not healthy and so forth. And I was probably differentiating between, I was probably trying to say celebrity when I was saying fame. Mm. So fame, the author of the book, Caitlin Beatty, she said that, and she's been around it too, apparently, from in probably the Nashville area and other places. You know, who, real quick, you know, her band was, that she was referencing was, oh, nuts. Now I'm going to forget it. Never mind. We'll just move on. It was another one. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's just, like, I used to listen to them too. Yeah. It's so funny. So anyway, she writes that for her, fame is actually notoriety for for a skill that you basically become known for. Something that you've done it's notoriety. Okay. And you just simply kind of like, you become known for it.
For that one thing.
Kind of for that one thing. Yeah. So you think of like, and I think of actor celebrities like right. way back when, say, the golden age of Hollywood or whatever. It was that they had a craft yep. that they were really good at. And they were just well known. They never had to really manipulate the thing. We were talking about another author that in the Christian world that he lost his church because he's very well known. And in comparison, mm-hmm. but he was jacking the system
right.
with his books and so forth. This is just, you really get good at what you do. Mm-hmm. And I've thought too, like, I find this difference between scholars and itinerant ministers. There's something more that seems showy and a following that follows itinerant ministry. And I don't feel like I see that in scholarship. I could be wrong, and it might be my own perspective. But the guys that I'll listen to, I'm like, I don't see the scholars really making this thing and developing that for themselves.
Yeah.
So
we're talking about an elitism in a way with celebrities.
Yes. And so the way she describes and defines celebrity, is more or less it's that notoriety that is projected through mass media where there's no intimacy required. Meaning intimacy of close relationship.
Yep.
You feel close to someone,
Right.
but the barrier of technology is there and you really aren't.
Yeah, you don't really know them. You're not seeing the other areas of their life. There's not an accountability in a system.
And so think about where we've seen this in the church, among other places, like online is one of the biggest things. Like someone doesn't attend, let's say they don't attend a local church, and they're like, well, but I watch so-and-so, and it's a famous name right off the bat, always. And they're like, he's really my pastor.
Mm-hmm. I've seen it and heard it, especially
How many
post-COVID,
times have we
right?
seen that? Post-COVID, Go ahead.
And there are people that I enjoy listening to. We're not downplaying. I mean, one of my favorite authors and speakers to listen to is Skip Heitzig out of Calvary, Albuquerque. But what we're talking about is when there's this reality that because this person seems so much better and more elite than everyone else, we're willing to trade a sense of community, a sense of belonging, just to follow after this one voice.
Yeah, you'll like this word that she throws in there where she says she defines celebrity as social power without proximity.
Wow, I do like that.
Yeah, I knew you'd like the proximity.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite words.
It totally is. But I think it's close to what you said anyway.
Yeah, social power without the accountability, without living in community. Can you have, this would be a fun one for another conversation, can you have celebrityism if you actually do model intimacy within a community?
Can you have celebrity?
Yeah. Do you actually become one if you're modeling true intimacy within a community and accountability?
I think that's one of the sticky things about it.
Yeah.
Because in the itinerant world, like that's where I kind of got I didn't get personal exposure. I got exposed to it because I traveled around a little bit and wanted to participate, develop some skills, hone some things and whatnot. But you start seeing the inside. And what I've also witnessed, at least I feel, is that we can sanctify anything.
Yeah.
We can sanctify any agenda, any ambition.
Yep.
We can, and most of it gets sanctified. Most of that real ambition gets sanctified with kingdom language in our world. Like when we talk about through some of the charismatic Pentecostal type circles that we have been a part of, I find a lot of justification goes on by just saying, well, they never self-promote.
Yeah.
Or they never this or they never that. And it just is like, okay. And there, sincerely, there's a lot of honor, there's a lot of integrity, and it goes both ways. Not just like one person has integrity but doesn't. It ebbs and flows through the whole thing, So
how would you differentiate fame? That was your question early on. So we're defining this sort of egoism, elitism, a sense of social power without proximity to community accountability. So how do you differentiate fame out of that?
I think I would differentiate it by saying fame. If fame is notoriety, then it's notoriety for having developed a skill set of some kind. So like take in our world, like whether it's you become known as a theologian, N.T. Wright, for example, right? Like him, don't like him, but he's got notoriety as a theologian.
Yeah.
Tim Keller.
Yeah.
Who was the guy that you were up at Evangelical, and he's a New Testament guy? You went and listened to him.
There was a couple I listened to. One of them was Ben Witherton III, who was down in Asbury.
He's good too. Yeah. Oh my gosh, he's really good. No, it was the
Michael
guy that
Breen?
talked about no, not Mike Breen. The guy that talked about women in the church.
Women in the church.
Sorry, no. So I asked you a question. Then
Senior
you're stumped.
moment.
Yeah. Anyway, but you get my point. Then.
Yeah.
You have. So it's like the content is what becomes the focus.
Yeah.
Where, again, I think it's the content is the celebrity. Like the content, it's all about the content. Like, let me just give you the content, the information, and fade to black.
So what you're saying is when somebody has a certain authority in an area, sometimes it creates a bit of what appears to be favor or fame that follows, and people are attracted to them because of their unique capacity or capability, but it's not necessarily they're removed out of community.
So in circles, yeah, they're not removed out of community, absolutely. So like in academic circles, you'll hear John Walton's name put around, right? Professor of Old Testament out in Wheaton.
Yeah, very well known.
Very well known. He's got some stuff I really like, and he's got some stuff don't like.
Yeah.
Right? Not that I don't like it. It does nothing for me, or I actually disagree with it.
Right.
Craig Keener.
Crazy
well known.
Yeah.
New Testament, right?
Especially on social, political context of the text.
Yep. And, but I don't think he has celebrity.
No, in fact, I'm his friend on Facebook, so hey, Craig. And
there you go.
I would say, I mean, there's not thousands of likes and stuff. I mean, people are really interested in what he has to offer. In fact, he was doing daily updates during the Asbury revival.
Yep.
And that got him somewhat of a following for a little bit, but it's not to the point where, I think when you get to a celebrity level, people defend you and your flaws. Like they begin to almost justify your flaws, and you then work harder at hiding them when you live into that celebrity culture.
And I think one starts to have to build a brand. I think celebrity is really built on building a brand.
I like that. That's exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. And because you have to create the following and so forth. But then fame, you're out because you love the craft.
Yeah.
Like I look at it and I go, I love theology. I'll talk to Anne-Marie now and I'm like, I don't bring fun to the party. She's like, no, you're a good. And I'm like, hon, no, trust me. I am not the guy you want to initiate a party with.
She says, leave your commentary set at home.
Exactly. Yeah. That's the point. That's the point. She's like, because I'm going, I know I'm kind of single-minded. Like, I love theology. And I'm not trying to become known. It's just, I want to develop that as a craft, though. Right? Yep. The communication of it and such. I don't care about a brand in that way. So does that make...
No,
that's my long descriptive answer.
I think that brand thing is a helpful distinctive. I think fame, we could go into a lot of rabbit trails. I think there's a dangerous... I mean, all of us have a desire to be valued, to sense some sort of dignity, the affirmation of others. And if we're not careful, if we do develop even a small, influence in the lives of other people... it's very easy for that to move into egoism, into elitism, and then celebrityism is just a step away.
So, are there ways that you feel you see celebrity represent itself, manifest itself within the church at large, or in the church local? I don't care. Like, how does it? Yeah, how does it get demonstrated? You go, that's kind of unhealthy.
Well, I'm gonna back up and give a foundation before I answer that question. Mike Breen, a couple years ago, when I was down in South Carolina, gave me a really helpful paradigm to Jesus' temptation in the wilderness. And in doing so, referred to how these three temptations, and we can look at them a different way too, but these three temptations are really at play in the church today. And so when I think we're talking about celebrityism, I think we're also talking about a place of the heart or ambition. Yeah. And so that, in Matthew, the first temptation Jesus encounters is one of appetite. And it's, what are you hungering for? Are you hungering for the things of God, or are you hungering to be known for who you are, right? There's this sense of or we might call it, right, the lust of the eyes. Like you just have this appetite, you want it. Yeah. And then, the second temptation in Matthew we really come up against is this sense of affirmation. Like he needs the affirmation of others is the temptation. If you really are the Son of God, and our identity gets questioned at that point. And then the third one is ambition, right? What is it that you're really after? If you're after the kingdoms of the world, you can just bow down right now. Yeah. And give it to me. And so these three things, this sense of the lust of the eyes, the lust of the flesh, the pride of life, they're at play in all of us all of our churches all the time, especially in a world that is driven on celebrity. I think our social media lifestyle, our social media driven connectedness has created, this desire in us, or it's capitalized the desire in us to want more of this, including our churches. We have followers, we get likes.
Yeah.
If the algorithms bury our posts a little bit, we start to not feel so valued and worth anymore because we only got 10 likes rather than 146 likes on our post. We should insert our Instagram tags here, so people,
Exactly. Like and follow for more, right?
I think that there's so many little places we see. I mean, churches are building brands who are worried about those same metrics, right?
Yeah.
Likes, follows, and we're calling it influence, but it's really, are we well known for blah, blah, blah. And,
you ever written a book yet?
no, I've not wrote a book yet.
So I'm not plugging.
Yeah.
But
you wrote a book.
But I've been asked when I went to find a publisher, one of their first questions was, so what kind of following do you have?
Yeah.
And I'm just sitting there going, none. We closed the church, and I don't have that's it.
All 46 members
I'm
of my family follow me on Twitter.
I wrote a book. I'm just looking for a publisher. And the guy's like, okay, fine. We'll still take your book, but it works like this, or this is how it helps. And you realize very quickly the publishing industry, for example, has always been about that. They monetize it a little differently now, but it's still all about what kind of brand do you build.
And you can justify that by saying, I'm trying to push this book. God gave me this message, right? But it's a slippery slope. I mean, you get into that. I think one of the biggest worries that I see in the church is not only around the branding of their churches and logos, and some of that's needed. We have a logo in our church, but there are certain speakers that seem to have no accountability and all authority, and people don't question them. And then the other thing that I see in churches is this desire to build, and Rip, we may have tension to this one, but like ministry schools or come take my course. There are so many pastoral leaders I see that are developing their own website where they're like, let me give you the 12 steps to overcoming this addiction in your life, or how to hear the voice of God, and we sell it for $995 or 3 easy payments of and we to me that borderlines into the conversation we're having here about celebrity.
Well, yeah, and it's tough. It's like you have the ministry schools where they're trying to do good things, right? Again, it's that you can sanctify it with the tag of kingdom. Mm-hmm. Yet, is it really built around a cult of personality? Like, is it all based on the face of the person?
Yeah.
And I think some of them are.
Yeah.
Hashtag
blessed.
Hashtag blessed. Oh, my goodness. So, I want to come back around to ways that it shows up in the church, right? But how about you brought up some passages. So, how do we think the Bible speaks to this?
Yeah. Well, I think there's a lot that we can say. I mean, there is, we've said for years, Jesus models an upside down kingdom. He takes the way the world thinks, the way that the religious systems were thinking, and he dumps them out and turns it upside down. He reprioritizes them. But I also think that in addition to just seeing this sense that Jesus lives very humbly and against the normal things, he gives us some really deep commands. A couple weeks ago, and this wasn't even our notes, but I'm gonna tangent here. Or was it this week? We looked at Mark 6b 12 through 6b through 13, where Jesus sends out the 12, and he sends out the 12 without extra coat, right? He sends them out without any money. He sends them out completely dependent on him, and completely stripped of any sense of privilege. There is no privilege or power or resource that they can call on. The only resource they have to depend on is the Holy Spirit. And when he sends them out, Craig Keener makes this point that, since you mentioned him, I'll mention Craig.
Absolutely.
he makes this point that when he sends them out 2 by 2, he's not only doing that for safety and for the credibility of witness, because if there's 2 or more, right, it creates a credibility. But he's also sending them out in the way that philosophers were sent out in their day. And philosophers were called cynics in this day.
Okay.
That's where we get our word cynicism from, right? And so he sends them out, and the next thing he says is, and don't take a bag. And cynics in that day would carry a bag with them, and they would stand much like a guitar player outside of market or in the center of square. They'd play guitar and then say, throw the dollar in a hat. But the cynics would give you philosophy. They'd give you truth. They'd engage you and then expect you to pay them for their services. And so, I mean, it could be that bag was just like an extra wallet or something, but it makes reasonable sense to also say that Jesus is saying, go completely dependent on me.
Yep.
Freely give as you freely receive. You don't get a platform. In fact, he doesn't send them into centers of towns. He doesn't send them into the center of, famous areas. He sends them into small Galilean regions and villages, and he sends them into homes.
Yeah, that's true. He sends them into the home where the center of the town, for example, would have been the well.
Yeah.
That would have been the center. Or the gate.
Yep, the synagogue.
That would have been the synagogue.
Social life,
yeah. I'm reminded, too, of, I'm never good with passage reference, right?
Yeah, I'm not either. You're fine.
But where it speaks of news about him spread throughout the whole of...
Yeah, Mark says that several times,
And yet, a couple things with that. Number one, Jesus would still try to get away from it.
Yeah. Don't tell anyone about this.
Don't tell anyone about this. Number two, he never tried to speak and like say, let me get close to the power broker of, right?
He walked away from.
He also didn't try to shy away from things that they wanted to hear. Like he didn't shy away from saying tough things.
Right.
So he's got this mass following. I forget where the passages might be in Mark. He's got this big following. And then all of a sudden, he's telling them all these things that are about suffering and hardship and so forth. And it says, like, everybody left.
Yeah.
And he turns around and remember, he was grieved. I'm pretty sure it speaks of like him being grieved.
Yeah.
And he basically turns around to Peter and goes,
Are you going to leave too?
Are you guys going to leave too?
John 6, yeah.
Yeah. And Peter's like, yeah, but where else would we go?
Yeah, we've already given up everything.
Yeah.
Look at that. They've given up everything. He's given up. They're not in it for fame, for celebrity. There's not a level of achievement that they're getting out of this by following him. It's something else.
So I recognize that, like, Jesus, it says this of him. And then he did everything. Like, Herod wants to see you. Go tell Herod to,
Yeah.
I'll be there if I want to.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. But he never tried to brush shoulders with the famous and the elite. Like, you could say, wasn't it Nicodemus that came to him at night?
Yeah.
Like, he would have been a preeminent teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, Nicodemus, this is what it requires.
Yeah.
Be born again,
And I'm not convinced Nicodemus came on board for that. It says he went away.
Yeah, it says he went away. That's kind of my point.
Yeah.
He didn't try. He wasn't saying, what could we do? We could really do something big together, you and me, Nicodemus.
Yeah.
You got the theology and I got the healing. Like, he wasn't doing that.
And the religious leaders of Jesus' day were. I mean, you have the Sadducees, you have the Pharisees, you have the Essenes, the Herodians, and they were lobbying for power. All of them, like the Herodians, saw themselves as the ambassadors between Herod, the Herodian party, and Rome and the Jewish people. They were the middlemen who kind of like protected them. You come through us. It was a mob boss.
Yeah.
You have Pharisees and Sadducees at different levels, which were willing to sell out at different ways. The Sadducees, if I remember right, were much more willing to trade some of or compromise some of who they were so that they could gain an ear of the emperor and get their way, bring about the way they wanted, the Zionist idea that you could bring the kingdom here. And Pharisees, they would utilize the power when they came. The Essenes, which I know someone's going to complain in the comments, but my belief is that John the Baptist, Jesus' cousin, was an Essene. They were the hippies of their day that pulled out into the wilderness. They lived among the poor. They were kind of like the early church fathers, and really kind of hung out in the desert and the wilderness, merely focused on the kingdom of God and staying away from both religious power and political power. And Jesus says, my cousin John, there's no one born greater of men than him.
Well, and it was John
Yeah.
that also said in John 3:30, speaking of Jesus,
Yeah.
he must increase
Yeah. And
I must decrease.
Yeah.
When we build platforms and celebrity, think of the guys in New York City, not that long ago now, but that's a whole platform, and he flamed out. We're building our own name. We've got to become more. And Jesus, John said of himself, I must decrease in order for him to increase.
Yeah.
And then Jesus even saying, like, what was his ambition? Yeah, sure, to share, to bring the kingdom, right? But for the Lord, or for God, for the Father. Yet he was also saying, if you want to become great, become the least.
Yeah, exactly.
And he wasn't looking. He's teaching everything that we're not doing. You mentioned #blessed Like, how many itinerant people have we seen?
Yeah. Flash their car, flash their house.
Forget the house and the car, because not even that. But they flash a trip.
Yeah.
And then they're like, look at this video of me having this amazing dinner out at this amazing place.
Here I am in Jamaica with a Mai
with the
Tai.
hashtag suffering for Jesus.
Right.
Wait a minute,
And it's a slavery. I mean, I have heard people say in this world, right? Like, if I get that level of recognition, think of what I can do for Jesus. I've heard that. And I'm sure you can think of people that have said stuff like that. And that I'm sure is something that is one of those still small voices in our voice that if we don't always pay attention to, but it's there. Like, man, I would really matter for the kingdom if I got here. And it's there, right?
By comparison, I've got my Hebrew professor. He's just the coolest guy, right? And he has been a professor for a long time. He does like 4 different jobs. One of them is pastoring a church. And he just faithfully pastors a church that's behind on paying him. He pastors another church that he's trying to hand over to someone else, just bridge them. Then he pastors another church. He speaks like 3 different churches on a Sunday morning.
Wow.
They don't even pay him, and there's no contract to pay him.
Yeah.
So it's not like they're behind on it. It's just, and this guy's just, he knows people. He knows Craig Keener. He knows a lot of folks from within the academic circle.
Right.
But he's still just sitting there going, man, if you know how to figure out how to turn around a church or grow this or that or whatever. He's joking in the sense that he's like, let me know.
Yeah.
Because he's just down in the trenches, in obscurity.
And isn't that where Jesus lived, though? And he changed the world.
That's the point.
Right?
That, I think, is the point.
I mean, Jesus has 11 faithful, borderline capable people following him and a traitor.
Yeah.
And he's able to change the world. He dies, which is like the opposite of us trying to climb the mountain in some way.
Right.
And it's through that literally the calendar changes. We have holidays. The world is transformed. Values have changed in the world post that experience. And he does it without any sense of stage. In fact, he walks away sometimes from the crowds when they form. It says, and he slips through the crowd.
Yes, yeah. It does seem like a different thing. There's a way that it shows up to me, or used to show up to me, like prayer lines.
Yeah.
Like, if I can just get the guy to pray for me.
And if you haven't come from a charismatic or a Pentecostal background, what Rip is saying is that sometimes after a sermon and there's a chance to respond in prayer, Rip might say, I'm going to use you as an example, like, hey, I'm going to stick around and I'm going to be here to pray for you. And it seems that when that happens, there's a mad rush, not for any of the other 10 possible prayer partners that are on the stage,
right,
but for that one guy. Because there's something different about him. Yeah.
And so here are a couple of little stories. Like there was one person, definite notoriety, right? He's definitely got notoriety. I went to a Vineyard Pastors Conference in Anaheim years ago now. He was invited in to do a workshop, and I mean, he blew the place up, like in a good way, right? There was such a level of faith that it was unbelievable, the presence that was there for people to get prayed for at the tail end of his workshop.
Yeah.
But what I noticed was there was all kinds of people ready and willing to pray, and it just kept. You could feel faith rising. It was really. Even to me, it was really pretty awesome to like be a part of. I was actually there to get prayer, not to be a
prayer
minister. So you could feel all that intensity of presence, but something switched, and it was like you could feel people start to want to get close to the guy.
Yeah.
And were you there, Blake? That was in Anaheim that year.
Come on in, Blake.
Potentially. I think the one thing that stands out when you're talking about this specifically for me is that, especially like as a younger person growing up in that environment, was that I found it very easy to lose sight of what I was, getting prayer for and who I'm asking for the prayer from. Am I asking it for prayer from the guy, or am I asking to have meet God and have an interaction with God and deepen relationship? It's very easy to be like, okay, the guy's praying for me, and then when nothing happens, you lost sight. You focus on the mighty man of God that's up on the stage, and not the mighty God who you were asking for interaction with.
Yeah, this was the most pronounced example of it I've ever been a part of.
Wow.
Because all of a sudden, people were turning their eyes toward the person, and the intensity evaporated.
Wow.
Straight away. And it was like any prayers for healing started to get hard and all kinds of stuff. It just, that intensity of presence just gone.
And don't you think that's just communicating just such a bad ideology, the great man of God syndrome. Or great,
woman
it could be a woman. Jesus, when he leaves, tells his disciples, right, I'm going to send the Holy Spirit, and you guys are going to do even greater things. Now, we can debate what that text means, but he empowers them, right? He encourages them. He calls them friends now. They're no longer disciples. He elevates them to kind of this horizontal, right?
Yeah.
Like they're friends. They're just like you and me sitting at the table. On top of that, then he gives them authority to go out, and he empowers them with the Spirit in the same way that he is. And he says, guys, I've just been here to light the fuse.
Right.
And he gives his power away, right? Dave Ferguson calls that he's a hero maker. He builds platform for other people. The idea that hero making is rather than building a platform for yourself, that we're supposed to build a platform for the giftings or whatever God's doing in someone else's life. And if we're all doing that, we're constantly giving the power away.
Right. Not sucking the attention, hoping that it gravitates toward us. Yeah. So here's one thing, like I even had that stuff start happening to me.
When you were speaking?
No, a little bit of speaking, but even just like participating, I'm going to go sit in while someone else is speaking and when my friend's speaking, and I'm just going to be there to pray. But you kind of get familiar and you become a familiar face, and then eventually people will come up to you and they'll be like, so you must travel a lot, and so forth, like all kinds of things. And I'd be sitting there going like,
because that communicates there's something better about you.
Exactly. And I'm sitting there going, no, when I get home on Monday, I'm going to be painting a wall.
Yeah.
But I would purposely try to I would put that in there because I try to burst the bubble a little bit. Here's another way that it shows up.
By the way, I have the opposite problem. Like when I offer to pray for everyone goes to the other. No,
yeah, exactly.
The other line
is like, what time who's the speaker at the conference?
Yeah.
And when are they speaking?
Yeah.
So, our friend Phil, very close friend of mine.
What's up, Double L Phil?
Yeah, double L Phil, exactly. Years ago, when they did their first a major conference up there,
Okay.
Phil refused, and his team refused to put their speaker list out. Meaning what times. Everyone knew what speakers were coming, but they refused to tell you when they were speaking, because it would have driven out of that celebrity
ticket sales based on that.
Ticket sales based on it, and I'm going to come and attend this one session, but not that session.
And I think the people you get are different too. You're not getting people that are coming because of the topic of the conference or the training event. Like, I've been in some of these rooms where I've heard people say, man, if he can just give me some of his mantle or some of his favor.
Oh, yeah.
And I do, I mean, hey, we have stories of prophets who were able to give some of their gifting or favor to somebody else. I'm not discrediting that. But I think it's gotten out of hand. It's like, if I can get that, there's going to be an extra, it's like buy one, get one free.
Right. Yeah. So, couple questions to kind of wrap it up. Two full questions to wrap it up. What do we think? How can celebrity be done well? What does it seem like God's model is? Number one. And number two. So we're doing a podcast.
We are.
It's always it's our present day vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
How are we not doing the same? Or are we doing the same? Like I put out a post one time years ago saying pastors, don't go after such and such and such, and the notoriety on Facebook and this and that and the other. And my wife's cousin piped up on me and goes, aren't you doing the same thing right now? And I was just like, I'm not going to get into this. I don't feel like I am, but I got to kind of pay attention to his comment, to his observation. So it's kind of a twofold. Like, how do we think the Bible, what do we think God's intention actually is?
Yeah.
Because I think I know what your answer would be.
Well, and what my answer is now isn't where I was 5 years ago, 10 years ago. I mean, I notice I'm on a path of trying to live emptied more and more of any sense of privilege or power.
Okay.
Not discrediting authority, right? I want to grow in intimacy with Jesus in a way that when I speak, his truth comes through me. I mean, there's authority, but I find myself more and more less enthralled with the idea of being seen. And I think that's happened a lot post, we've seen a lot of leaders fall over the past few years that they've had great sense of competency and calling, passion, but their character isn't. And for me, what I try to keep myself in check, and I'm going to answer your question again in a minute, is that when I mentor people or when I'm analyzing myself, I go on a spiritual retreat. This is how I analyze myself. Where's my calling, or where's their calling? Where's my character? That's the next thing, right? Where's my capability, capacity, commitment? Where's my coachability? I think that many of these people that are celebrities are built completely around calling and capability or capacity. There's no sense of character. And I also, I wrestle with, we didn't talk about this passage, but at the start of this year, there were two passages that became my verse for the year. One was given to me by a friend who spoke it prophetically over my life. It's Isaiah 57 about removing obstacles out of the road. And so out of that, I came up with a vision statement for my life of helping people think differently about Jesus, life, and everything in between. But the second verse that I named for myself this year is 1 Thessalonians 4:11, right? Just this idea. Paul says, make it your ambition, right? If you have any ambition, and the word there, as I understand it, is this sense of be driven for quietness. It drives us back to be still and know I am God. And when I looked at that passage some time ago, there was this idea that you just slump. Like, when you come home and sit in your chair, that you're slumped into God's presence. There's no unction in you to do anything. And I'm not there. I still sometimes, I have been on stages with bands. There's part of me that's like, man, I know what it's like to be seen and valued. And sometimes I feel like I'm in a closet and everyone looks at everyone but me. That's a weakness in us. We have to address those core longings in us and why they're there. And I think that's why a lot of these celebrities fall, is they've never analyzed, why is it part of me is longing for affirmation in this way? I think maturity, discipleship, looks more and more like giving it away. There was a guy at the Halftime Life. I can't remember what Bob Buford was that?
Yes.
And he always said, "My fruit grows on other people's trees."
That's just a great quote.
And that's a great quote. And I'm not there yet, but that's what I'm trying. So 1 Thessalonians 4:11 has become my key verse. Make your ambition eager quietness, to just live at peace, to live at shalom with everyone in all things.
Yeah.
So less power, less celebrity. I mean, I don't know if they can coexist, and I know that might upset people, but where I'm moving towards, I even see the role of pastor more as a facilitator of community. Our small church, we have conversations like this on a Sunday morning sometimes. I just say, what stood out to you? What word, phrase, image, idea, why? And we talk about it.
Yeah, I think we think we're discipling people en masse, right?
Right.
And you can't do it.
But Jesus didn't disciple in the crowds. We
No,
think
he did.
that. He did not.
He absolutely did.
Right.
He discipled when they went away together
Yep.
and they shared the meal after the teaching in someone's house.
Yeah.
That's when they started asking him,
Behind closed doors.
what's with the soils? What's
Yeah.
with the tree? What's with the, and that's when he did the discipling.
Yep.
So you can't, even 12 is a big number. I have my biblical theology perception of why I think there was 12.
Yep.
But 12 is a big number.
It is a big number.
And I've heard in systematics, which you've had, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So like you
Twice.
got the exactly. I know. I'm like, I want to be done with systematics sometime. But in systematics, they're like, you get the guys that are. This is why Jesus had 12.
Yeah.
And the rest of us can't because we're not God. But Jesus could have 12.
Yeah.
No, 12 is a big number anyway.
And so then we
no matter
focus
what.
on 3. We say, well, he had these 3 that were
Exactly.
really close to him.
Exactly. So I think discipling is the thing. This guy Craig Fee up in New York City, he's just follow me in as much as I follow Jesus.
Yeah.
And how can I just invest in you? And we're going to do the walk of faith as we do life together.
So do you think that there can be a good aspect to being a celebrity, or having a celebrity-driven culture, or having your pastor or your brand recognized?
So you're going to call me out?
Yeah, I'm asking you.
Okay, my straight up answer is no, I do not think so. I do not think it's producing substantive maturity in people's lives.
Yeah.
Plain and simple.
I agree.
So you won't get invited to the parties, but and there's no need to be critical. I just say, I don't think it's producing substantive maturity in people's lives.
Yeah, I mean, we could argue it plants seeds, sure. There's the level of influence. I mean, I think of Edward T. Hall and proxemics, right? There's public space, and we relate in that one way, social, private, personal. But let's face it, when we get into that personal space of 12 people, that's where the most transparency, vulnerability, teachability, coachability exists.
Yeah. Like there's a level of dying that goes into faithful observance, day after day, in quiet obsolescence. Like you said, Paul, make it your ambition to live a quiet life.
And he spent 15 years of his life after conversion in doing ministry, but relatively
Obscurity.
Yeah.
Total. Barnabas had to go find him.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, I think it's, and it's, to be honest, there are times in my life I've had that, that need, that draw, not to the big stage, but to be part of something, to be sometimes seen. And it's weird because every once in a while, I'll go teach here and there, and then now not being officially in a church, that's evaporated, right? Which is okay. You learn you die to things. And when I say it's okay, it's I'm okay that it's not happening. It's letting the drive of ambition die. And then I'm still asking myself, well, I still feel the same gifting. I still feel the same
Yeah.
sense of creative expression. How do I use that?
Yeah.
Right? Because for me, when I teach, and that's a visible thing if you're in front of 5 or 50 people, that is a sense of fulfilling something I think God is doing or built me for.
Yeah.
But how do you learn to separate that
Yeah.
from the celebrity?
And that plays into your second question, right? Like what we're doing right now, do you consider that stage? And I'm going to come back to, I think it's a place of the heart. And I'm going to be careful saying it because I could also hear somebody who is the pastor of a 22,000 person church, has a speaking, side gig, who will tell me, but my heart's good. And I would say it could be, but we also can say that at that level so much easier than you and I can, because there's nobody keeping you accountable. You cannot live removed from community. I mean, if I stood up and acted like authority, I'm in a 22 person church, they'd be like, Jeff, what are you talking about? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
And so there's a level of community that is essential to keep us anchored. And that's what keeps our heart in check. Because our thinking can convince us we're on the right path and that this is going to be effective. But it's the way that we allow others to speak in. That's why I say that I ask myself, am I coachable, or is the person that I'm discipling or mentor, are they coachable? Like, am I able to speak into their life? And that really does play under character too. But I mean, in all honesty, that's what keeps us. I think for me, one of the ways that I test is I don't go seeking opportunities to speak anywhere, but if I'm asked, I test it. You know what I mean? So it's Jesus sends out to 72 and he says, go proclaiming God's peace to everyone. And the ones that invite you into the house, the people of peace, those are the ones that you have influence with. And so you invited me onto your podcast. I'm excited about that. I accepted because of our friendship, because I don't expect this to blow up and have celebrity in it. But I hope what happens, to use a Wimberism, that as we talk about this stuff, we're just chewing on the meat and spitting out the bones. We're helping ourselves, and we're also creating permission for other people to do the same thing. We're not telling anyone anything. And I think that's one of the, like, when you speak from a position of power and privilege, you're literally using your celebrity mindset to convince other people how to think and act.
Yeah.
Where we're just creating conversation.
And I look at it for myself, and in this season of my life where I'm in between things, and it's like in between an I don't know what, like I don't know what's on the other side of anything. And so, but what I have realized, God has shown me the thing that I've really become that's close to my heart is the biblical theology, which I hope we'll talk about in another podcast, right?
I love it.
And so what I mean by that is to just drive the point that maybe something that's different is it's not the pursuit and the notoriety and things like that. That is not the pursuit.
Yeah.
What's held up for me is the content is like king. I just want you to see the content.
Yeah.
As best I can offer it to you, as best I can communicate it,
Mm-hmm.
I just want you to see the content, because what I see in the content sometimes I find is just too beautiful for words, and it'll bring you to tears, and I'm like, I just hope people that are far from faith, that don't know God, that do not know God's word, they have a perspective, and I'm like, man, this is not the God that we see in the Bible. And the content just becomes what should be front and center, because the content is basically God. Yeah.
So I have
and I
three,
think we real quick. I think we can still sanctify those things.
Yeah.
But
I agree.
Somehow how we approach it, maybe after that. What were you going to say?
I have 3 quotes that I've kept close to me in this season of where I've had this make it your ambition to live a quiet life. I mean, as that becomes my key theme in life, I've kept these other 3 quotes by me. I'm going to read them to you real quick. First one comes from David Bosch. He's a theologian. He wrote a book called A Spirituality of the Road.
Okay.
And his quote says, most of us have become so accustomed to our masks, the way we convince ourselves of what we're thinking, that we're not even aware of them anymore. And so I'm always trying to check my intentions. The second one comes from Corrie ten Boom, who was in Nazi prison camps, went on to be this old lady that just spoke everywhere. And she said, you should try to not be anything. Try not to be anything. That's your command, right? Try not to be anything, but an open channel for the Spirit of God. You can never be anything else, even though you think so at times. Follow the pathway of obedience, and you will be used by God then, by your own powers, your own ability to do. And all right, here's my third one, and this one comes from Henry Nouwen in his book, In the Name of Jesus. He says, I'm deeply convinced. Now, he wrote this book, by the way, I think in 2002. He said, I'm deeply convinced that the Christian leader of the future is called to be completely irrelevant and to stand in this world with nothing to offer except their own vulnerable self. That is the way that Jesus came to reveal God's love. And so that's a reminder to me that we are called to be irrelevant.
Yeah.
That's hard because of our core longings, we desire some sort of recognition. And that really comes back to Jesus in the desert. The reason he's able to not give in to appetite or wrong ambition or affirmation is because he's just come out of this experience where his identity is solidified by God. This is my son with whom I'm well pleased. And the breakdown of that is most of us have lost our identity or don't understand who we are enough, and we can be easily swept into these temptations.
Yeah. So I appreciate those quotes. Those are good. Like, I'm thinking, you asked me what I think.
Yeah.
What do you think, though?
Yeah.
Can they coexist? Can they?
I think there are unique people that, based on the way that they walk with God in intimacy, will become significant voices for the kingdom. They will be, to use the APEST model or the fivefold ministry, there's apostle-like people who break new ground for us. But I think they're far and in between, and they're rare. And I think everyone is aiming to be that. And no, besides those few people, I think that most of us are just called to be faithful in our homes, and that's the place of transformation.
I think, too, we've become accustomed to just referring to anybody with an itinerant ministry as an apostle.
Yeah.
And I think...
I was careful. I almost didn't want to use the word because of
I get it. So whereas we're kind of like, we were winding down, now we're ramping back up again. We'll wind it down for a second. But
part 2's coming.
Yeah. Like, historically, apostle was basically just the guys going around because it was
the sent one.
Well, and it was, they were going around to the churches that kind of had a little locale, but they were just going to tend the sheep, tend the people, to like take care,
to build the platform for them, the foundations for them.
And there was no notoriety platform.
Yeah.
There was
no, they're in the middle of a diaspora. I mean, they're hiding out and trying to keep their heads on their bodies.
It looks like it's some kind of idea. Oh, see, they're traveling. I think that's a poor relation into our 21st century into their world, where I think it's become a poor definition for the itinerant ministry today.
Yeah.
And I think it meant something totally different in their day. But
working with the people that I work with, one of the things that I have seen happen over the years is that when you get a little bit of truth, and it brings such an identity, they're broken, we pour some love of Jesus into them, the scriptures, then it's like, now I know something and I have something and I almost need to be somebody with it. And when they get to that point, it literally plateaus their journey. Yeah. They're no longer growing with Jesus. They almost become stunted, and they don't make the rest of the transformation. Huh. And a guy that I work with, we talk about this all the time. Why does that happen? And he reminded me recently of something Wimber said. Wimber, the founder, well, I shouldn't say, he was the founder of the movement, one of the second pastor of the Vineyard Church.
I describe him as the catalytic figure.
Yeah, the catalytic figure. I like that. He said once that if we want to continue to see the signs and wonders, because that's what people were high on for a while,
They
right? And
were.
that's what a lot of these itinerant speakers are high on, right?
Yep.
And that's what seems to communicate authority or power or privilege or celebrityism. He said, you almost have to dump out the bucket, basically. I forget his exact words, and get new people. And because those things show up early on in somebody's journey, but then you move into discipleship. And so that's why we see these ebbs and flows of the Spirit. I mean, it happens a lot on the front end, but then you move into discipleship mode. And I think that a lot of these celebrityisms are tied into needing to see and be part of that. It feels like you're part of something,
Right.
and we value that more, but it's literally just the initial milk. It's not the long-lasting stuff that leads to fruitfulness.
Yeah. That's good. Well, thanks for coming.
Yeah, thanks
this
for
is
being
fun.
here. Yeah.
I enjoy it, and
Make sure you hit subscribe. Like it, share it.
what we would like you to do is we love for you to go read your Bible, hoping that you'll come face to face with God by coming face to face with His Word. Have a great day.